Zoe. In which case, we'll hand over to David. Thank you.
Or Dammer, as it says on my name.
Or Dammer, the rapper.
I don't know. But I think, Dom, are you going to put the presentation on the screen, if you can?
Yeah, I'm just trying to do that, and I'm getting a host.
I might need to make you a host, Dom. Hang on, I'll do that now.
Thanks a lot for inviting us to talk. We are announcing publicly today another round of consultation. So we've just sent a press notice out this morning, I believe. So it's good timing that we're talking to you today. I'll touch more on the press announcement and the contents of that later in the presentation. But recognising that there are new members in the presentation today, Adam and Chris wanted me to kind of just go back to square one and just talk about the project in a more wider context. I recognise that most of you, probably all of you, will know about the Lower Thames Crossing. I think our press machine's pretty powerful in getting out there, but I think it's worth just touching on the whole project, and just so you've got a broad overview, and it will remind you of some of the key kind of objectives of the scheme. It'll also help us have a good discussion at the end. And I do only want to talk for about 15, 20 minutes maximum, so we can really boil down to, what members of SELEP wanted to talk about. And also, hopefully, as a wellbeing moment, to give you 5 minutes at the end, hopefully to have a cup of tea before your next meeting. So if I go to the start, I just want to talk about the need for Lower Thames Crossing. And this diagram here, well, you might not be able to see it on my screen. All I can see is lots of people's faces on the right-hand side. But what the diagram shows is that, Dartford Crossing stands on its own as really the only major crossing point across the Thames, east of London. And because of that, it's a massive focus for transport users. Dartford, designed for about 135,000 vehicles today, currently operates in excess of 160 and quite often 180, 190,000 vehicles a day. This brings massive unreliability to the area, not just on the M25, which is pretty unreliable all the way around, but especially at Dartford, but also the approach roads and the local communities around Dartford Crossing. And that kind of area of influence is quite significant. We've done a lot of work on traffic modelling, using mobile phone data to actually track real-time responses to how Dartford operates. And we see traffic queuing along the A13, through Thurrock, through the heart of Tilbury, through Grays, going further east and towards Castle Point. We see traffic backing up because of Dartford. And on the south side, Dartford town centre, going into Gravesham, through Gravesend and further down towards Medway, we are seeing such a big knock-on impact to Dartford. So with these kind of levels of traffic, which are unprecedented, and Dartford is the biggest congestion hotspot in England, but with these levels of traffic, we also are seeing a real spike in the amount of accidents in the area. We did a study around Dartford in the area, and we recorded 1,500 accidents in a single year, which required the motorway to be closed through Dartford. And untold injuries to people, but an untold amount of accidents further along the line because of the rubbernecking. So this is a real high priority for DFT to address, and we believe we have the right answer, which is Lower Thames Crossing. So if you want to flick on to the next slide, Dom. And Lower Thames Crossing is unprecedented in size, and it's certainly the largest undertaking that the DFT or Highways England have undertaken since the building of the M25 30 years ago. It will consist of approximately 14.5 miles of new route, and largely in 3 lanes in each direction, connecting to the M25 at the top of the scheme, just south of junction 29, and linking in to the A2 and M2 east of Gravesend. In the middle of it, we will also be providing a major interchange at the A13 and the A1089, which is critical to support the port activity in the area, but also some of the regional connections into Essex and London, which are massively important to actually reduce congestion, not just at Dartford, but some of the major interchanges in the area, such as M25 junction 30. Lower Thames Crossing will nearly double the capacity at Dartford in terms of number of lanes, but it's a complete game changer in terms of what Dartford is. And, you know, people's view of how Dartford's been managed in the years varies, but they've seen Highways England and DFT spend a lot of money at Dartford, cause a lot of disruption, but with only very short-term relief. We hope and forecast that Lower Thames Crossing will deliver 30 million journeys in its opening year, and that will grow over the years. But it will provide 30 million journeys and remain congestion free. And that is the key point. We believe we really have a scheme that's been located in a position further enough away from Dartford to be an alternative, further enough away so it's not just adding to a single focal point across the River Thames. And with that, it enables to provide relief not just on the Dartford area, but the local area, but also long-term relief. And we see 15, 25 years on, there is still spare capacity in the network for future growth. And future growth in the area is massively important. I know there's a pressure to build houses everywhere in the UK, but certainly in the southeast, we see unprecedented kind of targets set by MHCLG to build more homes in the area. And we also see a massive importance around the ports in the area to keep growing and supplying the UK GDP. And we've got some really big players in the area. The ports in Thurrock are massive to the area, but also the ports in East Essex and North Kent and South Kent, who will use the Lower Thames Crossing, are fundamentally to keep the UK economy going. So if I just go on to the next slide, Dom. I just want to touch back on, you know, why is this so different to Dartford? You know, what's going to mean it's going to be a completely different user experience. And one of the large focuses is the tunnel. It will be a twin-board tunnel, and the size of the tunnels are unprecedented. They will be the third largest bored tunnels ever constructed in the world, having diameters of around 16 meters. That is pretty much equivalent to a 5 or 6 story building in terms of height. So a massive undertaking, a civil engineering feat, but absolutely essential so we can manage the abnormal loads that Dartford can't. Just driving through, I know there's 2 lanes, it's quite an uncomfortable experience. We want to have a high speed experience through Lower Thames Crossing that doesn't restrict any type of vehicle. And certainly Lower Thames Crossing will manage most abnormal loads. But it will also have enough fire life safety equipment, cross passages, etc., that we can get the hazardous goods vehicles through. And the key ones we're really focused here is the fuel tankers, and we've got a massive refinery business along the Thames estuary here, and getting the fuel tankers through without having to stop at red light, without convoys, is such a big game changer for how we cross the River Thames in the area. And the size of the tunnels is also so we have a solution that is here for the long term that will not need to be managed or changed or tweaked or fiddled with. We are absolutely confident. Well, our predictions show that as demand increases, as far as government projections go, which is way into 2050, we have still got spare capacity. So this is a one-off investment, one-off disruption, but a solution that we want to keep on providing for a long, long time. So I just want to touch on the next slide, Dom, and just look at, so, you know, why is it so important? And the big driver is to kind of release the economic potential for the area. We like we say, it's a really desirable area to live in. You know, people are moving out of London and creating homes in the area. And even with this pandemic now, people are choosing now, but may start choosing now to not so much work in London, but work outside of London. And, you know, we want to create a better environment, a better infrastructure to build a platform for housing. And by creating this better infrastructure, it means that businesses will start having more confidence in growing and their competitiveness against the rest of the UK. Certainly, the work we've done with logistics companies, the real big hubs, not just the ports, but some of the big, the parcel forces, the DHLs, the Amazons, certainly some of the big businesses in the heart of Thurrock, they're absolutely foaming at the mouth for this because they just don't have that reliability for their big freight movements, which is a massive impact on their competitiveness. And for some people where it's just-in-time delivery, it means that they fundamentally cannot commit to some of the kind of the franchises that they want to expand into. So it will provide a massive amount of economic relief, but we also look at the impact communities have suffered over the years, the congestion in the communities, and also the amount of freight using local roads. And we've seen this from the mobile kind of phone data where we've been tracking vehicles, but we also see it from testaments at consultation from local residents talking about lorries coming down local roads because they're trying to run round congestion hotspots due to Dartford. So when Lower Thames Crossing opens, one of our big kind of priorities is to get the right vehicles on the right roads and get the strategic road network running better and the local road network freer for the communities. So as part of Lower Thames Crossing, we will also focus on the local roads that intersect Lower Thames Crossing in the area and building better access for horse riders, cyclists, and better and wider footpaths as well for pedestrians as part of our scheme. We'll be talking about this again a bit more in our consultation, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. Lower Thames Crossing is also an integral part of the RIS2 and RIS3 plan for the South East. And there was a lot of concern that Lower Thames Crossing was going to be the only gig in town. But from the RIS2 announcement, we've seen DfT put support to other schemes in the area, such as the A2 Access scheme at Dover, which is massively important to support some of the kind of the bifurcation issues and transitioning traffic between the M20 and the M2. We've also seen some junction upgrades, such as junction 5 and 7 on the M2, and they all complement Lower Thames Crossing. We do recognise that Lower Thames Crossing will create more traffic in certain areas and it will relieve traffic in certain areas. So we welcome that Lower Thames Crossing is not just a standalone project, and DfT and government are looking seriously at other projects that need to come on board. We also welcome that government are very focused on what future opportunities Lower Thames Crossing can provide. And you know, very happy to see in the RIS2 the Tilbury Link Road being put in as a scheme that certainly can pivot off Lower Thames Crossing once built to provide better kind of access to markets and housing in south of Thurrock. So we're really focused on carrying the conversations with government around what else Lower Thames Crossing can provide, as well as very, very, very focused on getting Lower Thames Crossing consented and delivered. So next slide, please, Dom. So I just wanted to touch on, you know, we are consulting. We've consulted 3 times already, and I'm about to talk about a 4th consultation. And it's really important to keep a focus on what people are thinking about Lower Thames Crossing. This was the output of the last consultation we did, and where we keep on asking the fundamental questions around, is it needed, and have we got the right location? And you know, we have worked hard to keep these green areas getting stronger and stronger through our dialogue with stakeholders and local people. On the right, you'll see there, this is the kind of the biggest issue is, you know, have we got it in the right place? You know, the people on the route we recognise are going to be impacted, and we're working very hard to try and minimise that. But we have done an enormous amount of work being in dialogue with people very close to the route. And that red area, which we've now got at 15%, is people who disagree or strongly disagree in the route. That area has reduced significantly from the 2016 consultation, where that red area was 37%. So 37% originally, when we announced the route, that PRA said they don't think we've got it in the right location. So we've moved the dial a lot. But we also recognise, you know, and that's why we're coming out and consulting again. We want to do more and more to try and get people more and more comfy with how Lower Thames Crossing is going to land. And the valuable information we get from consultation really helps us shape the final scheme. So if we just go on to the timeline, so just touching on the top of what we've done to date. Like I said before, we've done 3 consultations already. The first consultation in 2016 talked about route selection. Then it's in April 2017, the Secretary of State announced the preferred route, which is where it is at the moment. In 2018, we kind of developed that preferred route and started looking at the environmental mitigation, started looking at the traffic performance, and we came out and did our initial statutory consultation. From that, we got a massive amount of feedback. I think at that consultation, it was around 29,000 responses, which was fundamental in helping us refine our scheme. Also in July 2019, we started to undertake a major program of ground investigation, and that also has helped us define our final solution. And we have thrown a lot of investment at the ground investigation early on in the project, because when we go to DCO, we want to make sure our plans are robust. And our plans account for a lot of the risk, and a lot of that risk on this project is around the environmental risks, such as the habitats and the ecology and the hydrology of the Thames estuary. They're massively important for us to protect. But also we have got some tricky ground conditions through the marsh areas and the contaminated areas we see on the line of the route. So really important to get the ground investigation, and that has helped us shape our plans. Earlier this year, we came out with a response to supplement for our statutory consultation with our supplementary consultation. And this was really to check in back with everyone and say, look, we heard you and this is what we've done. And we made some fundamental changes to our scheme, such as extending the tunnel, such as changing the connectivity at the A13 junction, and coming back with proposals such as green bridges and landscaping to reduce the impact of the scheme. We're now looking at a final refinement consultation, and we're calling it refinement because it is really small, minor changes that we want to make to the scheme, but we think it's important to come out and talk to you about. And this is kind of our final tweaks before we feel we're in a position confident enough to go into a development consent order submission. I'll talk about the refinement in a minute, but then I just want to look forward in our timeline. We do plan to submit our DCO later this year. We want to do that in parallel with getting our outline business case approved by government, which is kind of going through the wheels of red tape at the moment. Once we've got the outline business case approved, we can submit the DCO, but we can also start going into competitive dialogue with our markets who are proposing to deliver the scheme. And the DCO process, which is roughly an 16 to 18 month process, will largely be the same time period it will take us to actually procure and secure 3 main suppliers to actually deliver our scheme. One supplier for the north of the River Thames, one supplier to deliver the tunnel, and one supplier to deliver the routes in Kent. Our plan is that we head towards a DCO decision in early 22 and finalise our competitive dialogue with our suppliers in early 2022 and award, with a view of starting road construction mid-2022 and delivering Lower Thames Crossing road open for traffic by the end of 2027. We do recognise, as with many major projects and the size of these projects, that there is a risk that the scheme could be delayed, and there's a risk that our DCO decision could be delayed. So we are mindful that the programme could slip into 2028, and it's important we talk openly about what we've allowed for in slippages, and we're very clear what's in our budgets, and we've made sure that if the scheme does slip into 2028, the scheme is still affordable, it still delivers against its business case, and it is still supported by government. So we work on a scenario of budgets and a scenario of timescales to make sure that whatever happens, this scheme delivers value for money. So if you go on to the next slide, Dom, I think I just want to talk about this next round of consultation. So as I said, it is refinement, and it's based on the consultation feedback and ongoing design work. And it's also features updates to Highways England's design standards relating to safety, relating to the environmental mitigation, etc., etc. But fundamentally, this refinement will show a reduction in the overall size of the development boundary. So this is the land we propose to take either permanently or temporary as part of our scheme. The land boundary will come in, and that is largely been around us really driving to single options for utility diversions, where at the last consultation we were holding on some areas numerous options because we weren't back to back quite with some of the big national grids of the world on how they were actually going to do their utilities. But now we're in a position where we've got single options for all our work, and that has meant us enable us to actually reduce our boundary. And with that boundary reduction, we've actually reduced the impact on properties, and that has always been our target on the project. We're very proud of the amount we've reduced the impact on people's property. We're still very mindful that every property we take is a massive undertaking and has to be an absolute must for us to do that. But for the size of this scheme and the amount of properties that we're impacting, which I think in terms of demolition is in the region of 40 properties now, we've worked really hard in this space. We've also made some minor changes to the highway design, and this is largely around safety improvements. And this means about slightly changing merges and diverges where we've got high volumes of traffic, updating signage, and looking at the fact that the government are very focused on this being an all-purpose trunk road as opposed to a motorway, and making sure we've accounted for that in our scheme design. We've also, as I mentioned before, we've done some more work around non-motorised users. We must make sure as our scheme, we are not delivering to just one user group. Accept that it is a road, and accept it's a high traffic strategic road, but we have also got to show there is some betterment towards all people that use any form of transport. So we've been looking hard at horse riders, cyclists, and pedestrians, and looking at how they can benefit from the scheme. And then finally, really, we have looked at landscaping and environmental mitigation. And whilst in early this year when we were consulting, we came back with a lot stronger response, we still heard a lot of concern around the impact. And a lot of the concern was around, well, you are planting many trees, and I think we're planting about 500,000 trees, but you're still keeping this as highway space. Can you not open some of this space up for recreation areas, or any other type of community kind of areas that the public can use? So we've looked at hard to try and give some of that space back to people, and certainly around the A13 junction has been a focus for us to do that. So we're hoping to come back with a scheme that is, again, provides a bit more open green space to people. In terms of the consultation itself, I just want to go through some of the logistics, recognising that we are still largely in a position of lockdown, and whilst the government is releasing kind of restrictions, people are still very mindful to stay at home and still being asked to stay at home as much as they can. And we want to support that. So we've spent a lot of time and investment on making sure that we can run a very inclusive online consultation. We will be holding all our material online, and we will be using the same sort of format as if you walk around one of our consultation events at a village hall. So you'll still be able to see kind of our notice boards of kind of information on specific areas. There'll be lots more commentary, lots more photos for you to look at. But we'll also be holding webinars around topic areas and geographic locations where people can dial into these sessions and listen to our experts talk with a Q&A session at the end. Now, I recognise that people may not want to kind of openly discuss some of their concerns at a webinar with lots of people listening in. So we are going to invite people to come and talk to us one-to-one on the telephone, and we're going to hold telephone surgeries where you can make appointments to talk to people just in general, or you can talk if you want quite a specific issue that you want to talk about, whether it's land and property, or whether it's about visibility or environment. You can talk to specific experts, and you can ring up as many times as you want. It'll be just a booking in session where people can ring up and talk to us. We trialed that at the end of our last consultation, because our last consultation just ticked into the kind of the early phases of lockdown. So we have got a platform in place, and it's tried and tested, so we're confident it will work. But we also recognise there are some people that just don't want to use the internet, and they would rather do it by hand, and they'd rather have the physical print in front of them. So we are making sure that people are aware that they can actually order a printed copy delivered to their house. We have distributed 150,000 leaflets around the area, especially focused around the actual kind of within like the 1 kilometre zone of the area, telling people that, yeah, you can come online, but if you really want a paper copy, we're more than happy to deliver you paper copies, and you can post in your response form, and we'll take that gladly. So we're trying to open this up as much as possible, and we're confident that this will be a very, very big and useful consultation as we run into DCO. And then I just want to finally touch on, getting ready for delivery as well. There is a lot of focus on consultation and getting ready for DCO, but we're also very mindful that there's a lot of competition around resources to deliver major infrastructure projects at the moment, and we are going to be heavily reliant on the local supply chain and the local knowledge to deliver this scheme. We have been talking to local suppliers and colleges probably for a year in earnest, in detail, but we want to carry on increasing this dialogue. We probably got about 600 local suppliers on our books at the moment who are actively engaged with us, and many of those are working through our partnership with the local supply chain school, which is a non-for-profit kind of free training school. And what that's enabling them to do is upskill themselves and get ready for the procurement competition. And we are offering a kind of a supplier training program, which kind of gives them how much effort they want to put into it is up to them, but they can go through like a bronze, silver, gold kind of accreditation, and our suppliers will be looking at kind of that level of accreditation, and it will give them great comfort if they've got it. And if you've got for example, if you've got the bronze accreditation, it means that your company is principally working in the key 51 areas that a government would expect from one of their suppliers. And governments are quite heavy-handed on kind of all the policies and procedures that companies want, and they often struggle in this environment. But we believe we've got a training program that is not daunting, and will upskill suppliers so they can come and work with us, but also so they can work on many of the other projects in the area, whether it's housing, whether it's race to support growth, or whether it's in the private sector relating to industry and commercial. So we're going to carry on with our supply training school, but we're also very mindful that, like I said, once our outline business case is approved, we're going to have our prospective tier 1 supply chain in place, and we want to get them linked up to the local supply chain as much as possible. We will be mandating a system called Compete For with our supply chain as a tool to engage with the local supply chain, but we're also going to start holding client-led meet the buyer events very early on in the tendering process, because we will be expecting the supply chain to list in their final tender submissions at the end of the 18-month competitive dialogue process. We'll expect them to list how they are going to focus on sustainable procurement, how they're going to reduce the amount of traffic as a result of their construction logistics, and how they're going to reduce their environmental footprint by minimizing waste, transport, and housing during the construction process. So very focused on the local economy, the local intelligence, supporting Lower Thames Crossing, and also very focused on apprenticeships to actually deliver this scheme, because of the major lack of resource in the STEM environment especially. But it's not just STEM for a project of this size. A £6 billion project requires skills from everywhere, whether it's security, whether it's HR, whether it's housing, whether it's catering, whether it's hospitality. We are talking to a wide range of people, and so far it's been fantastic, the diversity and breadth of people that have been talking to us, and we want that to continue. We believe that this can create jobs across a massive amount of sectors, and hopefully upskill them to work on future government jobs and other jobs in the area. So we've been really happy with the response, and I want to thank any of the members on the call today that have helped us promote the scheme to the local suppliers, because that has really helped us get our message out. So that's it for the kind of the summary, and I'm more than happy to take any questions now, or Adam, if you want to lead it in a different way, that's great.
Thank you very much, David. That was very helpful. I mean, really, it's all about questions to you. So absolutely in your hands. I mean, I'll keep an eye on raised hands and anybody who wants to come in and just to advise if people don't shout up. But yeah, it's like you said, completely open to anybody involved in the call to raise any comments or questions. So I've got Councillor Gledhill's got his hand raised. So over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Adam. What a surprise I'm talking on this. I need to reiterate, as I do every single meeting where the Lower Thames Crossing is mentioned, that we in Thurrock remain fundamentally opposed to the location of the Lower Thames Crossing. So just for clarity, that's not saying that we don't think there should be more crossings east of London, and indeed east of the Dartford crossing. It's just the route that's been selected for this, and the fact it's not a multimodal tunnel basically comes up short. And obviously that's the opinion of a significant number of people, not only in Thurrock, but that list is now has been expanding out for quite some time. There is, of course, our local concerns, such as the impacts, long-term impact on health, with effectively another large road going through the borough. The impact on the environment, just not only the actual environment, but also the visual environment of where it crosses across the fens. The fact that the entrance and exit is basically redoing the hash of a job that happened at Lakeside, where you have to come out of Lakeside onto the A13, travel to the next junction to come back to go eastwards. And this is fundamentally doing exactly the same there, but preventing traffic from going in both directions, and indeed north and south, with direct connectivity. So the impacts for the logistics, which was mentioned repeatedly, and indeed the ports, with this plan, excluding any plan that would hang off of this after it's completed, would mean not much of a difference to Thurrock. All it will do is just add extra traffic going to certain junctions and then coming back to be able to access the road going either north or south. So that's further movements in Thurrock that could have been avoided with a much better scheme. I'll briefly touch on the multimodal. If we'd had a tunnel capable of rail or indeed even just light rail, would have made the connectivity to Kent and then Essex, then into London or to wherever it would go to next, especially for freight, so much easier rather than the very convoluted into London, round of London, all the way to North London, and then come back round to come out to Thurrock, and indeed not just Thurrock, but into Barking and into the North London shunt terminals. So again, it's from our point of view, it's a bit of a missed trick on that. Obviously we've heard massive increase for housing. This cuts a huge swathe through Thurrock, more so than it does in any other part of the route. Which, and I can't remember off the top of my head, and I'm sure if needed I can supply it, but it cuts out a significant number of potential building areas for us, and indeed not just for new towns or for big developments, but also for small developments, not just for the road, but for the ancillary uses either side, for access, for emergency, for repairs, etc., etc., etc. So from a Thurrock point of view, there really isn't much to say that this is going to be a benefit for us. I must say it's somewhat parochial, and Thames Estuary Commission and everybody else, including myself, saying we need more north-south connectivity, not just across the river, but indeed across certainly across Essex. It does kind of sort of fly in the face of that argument, but it doesn't when you start going into the granular detail of what this impacts on Thurrock. Bearing in mind that Thurrock is 60% of the route, and that's without obviously the portion that goes under the Thames, which obviously no one can build on. It's a huge deficit for Thurrock. And we've already done one study in relation to the economic impacts, which have been sent out to select members. Indeed, if anyone hasn't got one, if they could, via Adam, just let me know, we can get one out. And indeed, we're at the point of we're commissioning the second impacts assessment, both economic, local, health, and environment, which again will be made available as soon as it's complete. Then I'm going to go on to the actual aspects of this through the consultation. I'm currently sitting in an area that's not renowned for fantastic Wi-Fi connections. Indeed, I'm looking at Adam and he hasn't moved for about 2 or 3 minutes and he's probably waving his hands or something frantic. So I can't do video. I can't, oh no, he's moved, there you go. I can't do video. I can't do video on Teams or on Zoom. There are a significant number of people directly in the affected area who will be in a similar situation just for connectivity. That's without those people who do not have the connectivity full stop, or indeed the understanding and knowledge to be able to upload, or access a webinar without very clear, simple instructions. So I feel it's going to disenfranchise a significant number of people in Thurrock. 2 of the areas that we have identified locally as having huge connectivity problems are East Tilbury, Alsett, and as in the wards, not just the towns of that name. And surprisingly enough, those are going to be the 2 wards probably most affected by this, and will be disenfranchised from being able to come forward and make their representations heard. So there would be the request to hold back the consultation until such time as we can facilitate public meetings. I mean, obviously with government guidance changing regularly, we're now down to 1 metre plus. And then what does that mean for a meeting of a relatively small number of people in quite a large building, whatever that may be, obviously with a 1 metre plus protective masks, or indeed at the 2 metre distance, perhaps even holding something at Alsett Showground or something like that, where you can easily maintain that level of distance, and there'll be more buy-in from those that are going to be affected. So with that, I thank everybody, and indeed Highways England for their presentation. They have been in regular contact with us and it has been very constructive. And hopefully from today that we'll be able to move this forward in a more constructive way, and hopefully if this is going to go ahead, to maximise the benefits for Thurrock rather than where we are now. So with that, Adam, I shall mute and thank you.
Thank you, Rob. David, did you want to respond to Rob first, or shall I invite the other people with hands up to come in as well?
I think with regard to Rob, and I thank him for mentioning the dialogue we're having with Rob. It's been very good. Getting direct access to the leadership of Thurrock has been brilliant in terms of helping us shape our plans and advising us how we interact with his residents. Rob's touched on a lot of good points there, and we have been working through them with Thurrock Council over the years. I think we do need to come together in terms of the economic case of the scheme, and I want to meet with Rob's team around their economic assessment of the project, and I want to do that once we are back to back with government on our own outline business case, which, like I mentioned, I'm hoping to get approval late summer, early autumn. And I think at that point then we can really start to get a powerful kind of joined up narrative around the economic benefit. From our assessment, we see that the 2 biggest local areas that get economic benefit from the scheme are Thurrock and Gravesham. And as you move further away from the crossing, the economic benefit reduces. And certainly we see that whilst this has national importance and supports the economic GDP for the UK, we see that this will be vastly important for the regional area in terms of economic growth. But yeah, I'm happy to take more kind of question related stuff now. Adam, that'd be great. If anything's got anyone?
Thanks, David. Yeah, so 3 hands up, and I'll just go in the order that they went up, and which means I'll start with my chairman.
Thanks, thanks, Adam. So, David, I just a sort of very procedural question. That is, clearly the Thames Estuary Growth Board is just up and running. I don't know whether they've had. I think they just had their first meetings or having their first meetings. Clearly, this is an incredibly important project for the Thames Estuary. So, I just wanted to have assurance that you're in touch with them and they're fully plugged into all of your plans.
Yes, certainly. We're having monthly calls with
Great.
Kate and her team, and we're happy once the board's up and running to go and talk to the board as a whole. Certainly, Kate's and the team's advice has been fantastic in terms of helping us reach out to some of the stakeholders we haven't previously spoken to.
Great. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you both. Next is Catherine Rankin.
Sorry, and I should introduce myself. I'm subbing for Roger Goff. I'm the Deputy Cabinet Member for Highways at Kent County Council. So I've just got a couple of questions. One is just a very local one. You mentioned about diversions to utilities, and although I'm not particularly well briefed on this, I understand there's an issue about utilities, the works required to utilities, meaning that more of Sean Wood is going to be removed than perhaps Kent County Council would like. So I just wanted to clarify whether there's any change on the position for Sean Wood. And my second question is more general about SMEs and engaging with them. I wasn't quite sure from your presentation whether you go out and find the small businesses that you think might be useful to you, or whether you have something on your website. I had a quick look at your website and I thought, well, if I was an SME, I can't see anything immediately that would say, here's how you can get skilled up, here you can get, this is supply chain school information. So I wondered if you have anything for SMEs that is accessible without you having to contact them first, and if not, are you planning on doing something like that? Thank you.
Thank you. For your first question, Catherine, yes, this consultation comes back, like I said, with a more refined approach to utilities, and with that we've been able to reduce our footprint in some of the woodlands on the south side, certainly. So Sean Woods will see a big reduction in the amount of land take we require, but also the other woodlands in the area, including the huge area covered by the AOMB, has a lot lesser impact. So certainly we can go through the scheme in detail with Councillor Goff. I'm sure we've put an invite out to see himself and yourself as part of our pre-briefings en route consultation. We can go through that with you. With the SMEs, we have got on our web page a small area around local suppliers, and people have been using that to get hold of us. But we're also using channels across the kind of the Kent and Essex and Thurrock borders to get our message out around getting involved, and certainly the business boards have been really helpful. So have CELET in terms of getting that message out, and we had about 600 people signed up so far. And yes, we do want to have our own register of people that we can hand across to the tier one supply chain and say, look, all these people are interested. They've done these supplier accreditations with us. They've been talking to us for X amount of years, and here's their details. Go and speak to them. And we also want to hold a lot more community events with the supply chain. They're all linked together. They all know each other. They know how to work and how to trade in the area. And I believe they are going to be massive in giving the tier one supply chains, that chain people, that's a competitive advantage. The network as we know it is very constrained. There's a lot of traffic, but however, because the area has thrived, and construction has been a massive part of it. If you look at the London Gateway, look at Tilbury Port, they've done some massive construction projects very successfully, with very little impact on traffic. So we want to learn from that, and using the local supply chain is going to be fundamental to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. So next two questions are from two of our new business board members. I say new, I don't suppose I can say that anymore. So just moving to Matthew Arnold next.
Thanks, Adam. That was a fascinating presentation, thanks, and it answered a lot of questions that I had, having probably not kept as close a track of it in the past as I should have done. And speaking from experience, I have no idea of the amount of time I've lost from having to travel regularly to Southend and Thurrock in the past, and having to allow an hour, 90 minutes extra on a journey just in case there was an issue at the Dartford Crossing. So I speak from bitter experience there. Could you just clarify what the add-ons are in terms of the A2 M2 corridor? Because I know there's been a lot of talk about the Whitfield and Lyddon dualling, Brenley Corner. Of particular interest to me is I think capacity of the M2 between junctions 4 and 5, and what modelling was done to assess the effect of the shift of traffic from the M20 onto the M2 corridor.
So because of the size of our scheme, Matthew, we've had to construct a brand new model, and a vast model, and which covers the whole of Kent, most of South Essex, well, all of South Essex, and including Thurrock, and goes into Greater London. So it's been a huge piece of work to actually build that model. The next part was to actually test that model and make sure it was realistic, and that's been using mobile phone data to make sure we've got a platform that we can use not just for Lower Thames Crossing but for other projects in the area. And we have been sharing our model now with local transport authorities to make sure that everyone's kind of working to the same hymn sheet as such. We have been working alongside DFT now for a couple of years, once we've kind of got a bit more clarity over how Lower Thames Crossing will impact the area, and to start building up plans for parallel schemes. And we also recognise that there is a lot of congestion hotspots in the area, especially around the A2 corridor in Kent, and the issues of having a single track A2 coming out of the Port of Dover, people using the M20 then hopping across through Bluebell Hill and up into the Midlands. So we recognise that there are existing hotspots. So we've been also working closely with Kent County Council to look at Highways England can support the development of other projects, and certainly we have invested money with our teams to actually spend time working on projects on local roads which intersect with the strategic roads. And that's quite often a point of contention, is when is it a strategic road issue, a Highways England issue, and when is it a local road issue, and where does the line draw? But on some of these big fundamental schemes such as Bluebell Hill, I'm glad to see that Highways England and Kent County Council are working together, and CELEP have been really the glue to try and pull this all together. So that's been really useful. As part of Lower Thames Crossing, we have commissioned a study that looked at from the top to the bottom of the M2 and the A2, along with also the A13, the A12, and many other routes in the area, and some of the smaller local areas. And that's been a study run by Highways England, but impacts strategic and local roads. Some of that study work has put a catalyst into other projects. Certainly, the A2 Dover scheme has resulted from that, but also Kent County Council's voice with regard to the need for junction upgrades, especially around junction 4, 5, 3, 7. All that area has been massively important in informing DFT's decision on where to spend money. So we're all working on a bigger picture than just Lower Thames Crossing, and I believe that Lower Thames Crossing has helped put some other big projects on the map, given them a new birth of life. The A2 access scheme has been stopping and starting for a long time, but I now believe that it's got a real firm footing to go forward. But like with any scheme, it won't just happen because Lower Thames Crossing is going to happen. It's got to stand on its own 2 feet, have its own business case, and it's got to wrap around the local requirements, the local plans, as well as the strategic requirements. But I believe we're in a lot more collaborative environment to actually do that between Highways England, CELEP, and the local authorities. So I think it's a better future for Kent and also South Essex.
Thanks. That's very reassuring. Thanks.
Thanks for that, David. Next question is from Carol Ford.
Hello, David. Thank you for that presentation. I'm not very close to it, and I'm still a newbie to the business board. So I've only been doing it a few months, and we hit COVID straight away. So please forgive if some of my questions are a bit basic and fundamental. My first thing was with regard to the modelling that you've done with regard to the 30 million additional journeys. How does this compare to the modelling that was done for the M25 crossing and opening? And that's just really out of interest, because that was, as I understood it, it was under-modelled because people use cars in ways that they didn't do before. So presumably that will have been taken into account. I think for us as a business, the reason I raised the question is that for us as a business, looking at it just solely from producing something in Kent and actually then being a national distributor, if you like, of what we produce in Kent, to have this crossing, because going sort of virtually into London via touching Dartford and then going out up country, for us the Lower Thames Crossing is an absolute blessing. So of course, we're incredibly keen on it. I think the other thing was, why is there no train provision for train freight? I don't quite understand. I'm sure that perhaps somebody can explain that to me. It would make sense if you put in two great big massive, third largest in the world tunnels in the ground, and sticking a train line in there must be pretty straightforward, I would have thought. What happened to 2021? In your timeline, there is a gap for 2021. Is that the whole of the year is for consideration of the project? Is that correct?
Okay.
So that's my question there. But really getting to the point now, really, with regard to business and local business. Us as a business, we produce product here, and then we won't be the only one, but we've never supplied something like this. We've never supplied government. We've never supplied tier one. Don't even know what tier one supply chain is. So sourcing food that's produced here in the CLAP area. I'm not just talking about Kent here. I'm actually talking more widely, because there's food products produced over in Essex, for example. How's that going to? How do you envisage that working? Because we would really, be excited to be involved, to be able to supply produce that's grown in Kent or produced in Kent and Essex or the wider CLAP area. How on earth are we not going to get lost in this whole sort of process when you've got big, massive construction businesses getting involved? And I understand that you've got an ambition, because that's all I can really think that it is, that you're winning bidding suppliers have supplies from local producers or whatever they might be, and I get that for steel and manufacturing and all of that, but how's that going to sort of like go down into sort of like the real nitty-gritty of people that are producing food particularly, and how can they become engaged in it? Because we've got a pretty thriving economy here in Kent and Essex with regard to food production. So I'd be really interested to sort of like to get behind the headline and actually, what's the reality of this look like? Okay. So sorry, there's. I'm sorry that it's a few questions sort of bundled up, but there you go.
Okay, thanks, Carol. I think I've got 4 questions. I've got a feeling you might have asked me 5, so just prompt me if I've missed one out. So the first one was about the traffic modelling in the 30 million journeys, and how our thinking's changed from what the M25 kind of modelling was a while back. And I think the point to note is we're now, in this current stage we're at, we're in a world of new technology compared to when the M25 was built. If you go back 10 years, when you go to major junctions, you'll see loads of people sat in cars in deck chairs, counting cars and asking people to wind their window down, asking where they're going and where have they come from. And a lot of traffic modelling 10 years ago was done by roadside interviews and trying to get the intelligence there, plus counting cars and lorries. With our scheme, we use mobile phone data, and that has been a step change in kind of the accuracy of our forecast, because we don't have to stop anyone. We're not only just, and because we're not stopping anyone, we're not just focused on the people in lane 1 of a carriageway, because the people in lane 2 will never stop for a roadside interview, and the people in lane 1 are generally the local people or the lorry drivers. So by using mobile phone data, we're getting a real breadth of information, but we also track them to wherever they finished their journey and where they started their journey. So we get a full end-to-end journey picture, and that starts to really help us build a really strong kind of view of when people are trying to cross Dartford at the moment, where are they coming from? How many people are coming from Scotland? How many people are coming from east of England? How long has it taken them? How much of that is freight? How much of that is local people? And we can start looking at all sorts. We can look at the economics of the area. We've used all this information to actually inform our traffic predictions. But we've also done a lot of work with businesses. We've done a lot of surveys. We've used the Dart Charge membership, all the people that are subscribing to Dart Charge. We've been asking them a lot of questions over the years, talking about the scheme, talking about how life would change with a new scheme in place, and that has helped inform our modelling as well. And also we get an update from government every 6 months about their view on traffic. Their view on traffic patterns and growth, and that is massively important because, as you said, people's choice of traffic and how they work and how they play changes on a very regular basis, and this lockdown will certainly feature a change in pattern of traffic. So we'll be looking towards government, towards DfT, to be giving us that intelligence, and we'll keep feeding that into the scheme as it moves along. I think the next question you asked was about rail. Was that the next one, Carol? The one in the middle. So why have we not got a rail scheme? And it was on the books for a long time. I joined the project back in 2015. And at that point, the departments in DfT were really pushing hard to try and find an opportunity which encompassed both rail and road. They did a lot of work in that space, but they could not get to a point where they could find a viable scheme that would support both. They looked at rather looking at separate schemes at this case. Maybe it's the wrong answer, but we're very much guided on government as Highways England, who build roads, on what to do. But there's exhaustive amount of information that's in the public domain and form part of the 2016 consultation about why a new rail crossing as well as a road crossing was discounted at this time. And I guess it's probably partly due to the lack of north to south rail actually infrastructure in Kent or in Essex. So there's nowhere to link into. So the kind of the enormity, like the size of a scale of a rail link, is not just putting rail in a tunnel, it's all the network connections that would be needed to provide north and south of the tunnel to actually deliver that. Start getting into the world of a high-speed kind of two place, which, you know, would add another 20 or 30 years to the scheme in its development. And certainly Dartford, we're not seeing a slowdown in demand there. And there's a call to action to actually solve Dartford very quickly. In terms of there is a gap in our timeline in 2021, and that is because the scheme will go for a development consent order, and this is a new planning process that came in 2008, and it's very focused on delivering major infrastructure projects. And it's a more robust process than what was previously provided through the Transport Works Act, and it allows more time for examination. It allows more time for stakeholder representation, and it allows more time for consideration by the planning inspectorate, but also by the government in making sure this is the right decision. So, through going through the statutory process, it takes a minimum of 16 months to actually go through us submitting our consent order, it being reviewed by the planning inspectorate, it being examined and giving people time to represent their concerns, having those assessed, and then giving government time to take a view on it. So it is a process, but it's there designed to give protection. Similarly, our procurement process is around about the same length of time, and that is because of the size of the scheme. We want to make sure that whoever we appoint as our tier one, and when I've said tier one, I noticed you said you weren't sure what tier one. These are the headline suppliers that will be accountable for delivery of each of the 3 zones of our scheme. We want to make sure that we can hold them fully accountable to deliver this scheme on time, on budget, in a considerate manner, and safely. So we want to spend time developing a relationship with them, developing a point of trust with them, and developing a plan for the project before we award it until we're fully comfortable. So we'll do that in parallel with the development consent order dialogue. But what is important to note is that we're not going to just disappear for 18 months. We will be out talking about the scheme. We'll be out giving updates. We'll be out pushing government very hard to make sure this remains a must for the South East. This is a once-in-generation opportunity for the South East. £6 billion of infrastructure doesn't come around very often, and there's massive demand across the country to spend money. So we've got to keep pushing the need for this scheme. And then lastly, you talked about local supply chain, and I want to reassure that it is not just for the welders, the manufacturers, the construction workers, and indeed in the seminars we've been doing, the local suppliers, we've been using case studies where we've used the same supply chain school with people like caterers, with road sweepers, with breakdown companies, with hospitality people. And they talk. We've got some very powerful videos, and I think we'll send a link out to Select where these are held. I think they're on our website, but I might be wrong. But where they talk about where they started their journey, believing how the hell can I get involved in a client government project, to a point where they grew their business by 1,000%, and they're now looking forward to work on the next big road scheme or the next big power station. So they've changed their mindset completely. So it's a really warming story, and it's massively needed for our scheme. We won't be able to do it on our own. So Dom, who's on the call, I'll get him to send some information out to the Select board members about where you can access, because I heard also earlier that people were finding it difficult to find where the supply chain stuff was on our website. Sorry, you're on mute, Carol.
Sorry, if you could, that would be really helpful.
Did I answer all your questions, Carol?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. And I would really like to understand the procurement process a bit more from a very, from a local, from Kent and Essex perspective, in terms of actually, and from a perspective of sectors that aren't typically involved. When you talk about catering, for example, caterers would not be particularly, the big caterers that you would probably be involved with wouldn't be particularly mindful to source produce, for example, from Kent and Essex. They'll be more mindful to source it from anywhere else in the world because it's cheaper, apparently. So we've got interested in that.
Yeah, we've got some statistics on. We asked all the suppliers how far have you travelled to come to this event, how many staff have you got, on what sector you're in. So we've got some work on that. I'll see if Dom, who's on the call, if we can share that as well. That'd be quite useful.
If you could, that would be really good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you both. Really good questions, Carol, and good responses there as well, David. I'm conscious that we've gone 10 minutes over the planned time. We're taking a few questions from people. Before we close, I just wanted to check that nobody else wanted to ask anything of David or the Highways England team. I don't think we've got anything else coming through. I mean, in which case, it really sits with me to wrap up the session. David, that's been really helpful. Thank you. The information that you've put across has been really comprehensive, and I think we're all really clear on what to expect next. You've had some good questions and good challenge from members of our board, which is what we're here to do. Like that. We can expect that this will be obviously a continued conversation for a number of years, but these touch points and us feeling like we've got access to the information is all very important. So thank you from us. Thank you for taking part. Thank you to board members for your attendance, for your questions. And we'll certainly look forward to doing more of these, not only on Lower Thames Crossing, but on a lot of other items relating to the economic development of the whole area. So thank you, everybody. Have a good Monday afternoon.
Thank you.
And speak to you all soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.